Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture podcast. I'm really excited today. He's a casting instructor, guide, Fly Culture creative director, and my friend. I'm really pleased to have Brett O'Connor back today. I've got to start with an apology to him that we did one. I reckon it was one of the very, very early podcasts I recorded, but being the technophobe that I am, I think I cocked up the microphone a little bit. So he didn't come across very, very well in the sense of nobody could hear him. So we thought it was about time to revisit some old ground and chat about life in general, chat about fishing, how we met each other, a little bit, of course, about the magazine too, and go from there. He's a fascinating guy, great company, and one of life's positive people as well. So he's good to be around. Brett, mate, it's great to catch up with you again. How are you doing?
I am awesome. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for having me back. Sorry the last one didn't quite work out. I don't know whether it was your recording or my brummy tone that maybe kind of messed things up a little bit. But no, it's great. It's great to be back and happy to do it again with you, mate.
Fantastic. It is. I think it was one of those things that the microphone I had here, I had it switched. I didn't realise that it obviously got knocked to that it would only pick up my voice in one direction. So I don't think it's the Brummy tones too much, but I can't say that definitively. So we'll see. But you're in good shape. It's been busy for you, hasn't it? Despite everything that you've recently moved, you've a new addition to the family as well. So it's been, despite lack of movement, it has been a busy time for you, hasn't it?
Oh, honestly, I think you couldn't make it up. I think last year we had the news that we were having a new arrival to the family. So we thought, well, that's amazing. And for a long time we were talking about whether we should move house. And I was very keen on where we lived. I was quite lucky that we had a little bit of the land born that was kind of running through the back of the place where we were living. So it's nice to always have that option just to kind of nip out and fish it. But with the new arrival, the house was too small, so we had to kind of get something bigger to accommodate him. So no sooner did we put the house on the market, we went into lockdown. So of course, during that time, you think, could we have picked a worse time? And then luckily, as soon as we kind of came out of it, we had a buyer, and then we started looking around. And you go through that whole process, don't you? Look, trying to find somewhere to move house, and where do you go? And we were looking all over the place, to be honest with you. Deep down, I think I always wanted to kind of move down to the Hampshire way and get closer towards the kind of the Test and the Itchen. But I knew that's taking the wife away from her current group of friends, which wouldn't go down very well. But luckily, we found a house that we loved, and I had to make sure that she loved it too. And yes, now we're down near Stockbridge, a little village called Houghton, and luckily loving life. It's a great move.
And I guess for people who don't know it, that I would say Stockbridge is one of the few places, certainly in the UK, certainly England, that could be termed a fishing town, couldn't it? And it's one of those ones around particularly Mayfly time, and a lot of the other time as well, that you'll see cars with rods strapped to the bonnets, and the stores will be open bright and early, and you see people wandering around in fishing gear. It's about as near. I suppose you can't at the moment, but would that be an apt description? I guess you're kind of looking forward to that, seeing that, aren't you?
I can't wait. I think I've been one of those people that's descended on the town during Mayfly and other times of the year when you are seeing exactly that. And for the people that don't know, you've got part of the River Tess kind of literally running through the village. And there's a couple of little places actually where you can even feed the trout. There's a couple of spots right next to one of the Orby stores, and they've got some trout in there that ridiculously sized, several pound, big fatties. And you can actually go into the Orby store and buy a bag of pellets and feed them and watch the river erupt. I think I heard a story once that somebody saw it and didn't realise that they were the village pets and actually went out with this fly rod and tried to catch it. And I think, the local villagers kind of pinned him down and just said, no, they're our pets, leave them alone. So yes, it is. I think it is one of those villages where it really does kind of kick off, and there's always cars driving around with the number plates or the designs on the back of their cars or whatever it is. So it is very much kind of centred around fishing. I think all the local pubs, they take pride in all of that. So if you are a fishing nut, then obviously it's a great place to be.
And even if you're not fishing, like you say, seeing the fish, and I always try and spot them. And it was funny. I was there one time. I was probably actually, as I always am, ridiculously early. And I think I was meeting you to go fishing. And I thought I'll grab a coffee in Stockbridge before I come and meet you. And it was interesting that, like you say, those fish in that spot by the Orvis store, and I bought a pastry deliberately so that I could throw some stuff out for the fish. And it was interesting that those fish were there, but there was one where it sort of bends and goes under the pavement, really, doesn't it? And there was a huge great brown trout under there, and I could see it, and I thought, wow, I wonder if it's only because I'm an angler that I spotted that fish, and I flipped a big bit of Danish pastry or whatever it was, and this thing, yep, I'll have that, thanks very much indeed. And it was just waiting, quietly going about its business in that hidden away spot. But it, like you say, it's kind of cool, and I guess you must be excited looking and searching and hunting out new fishing opportunities for you, aren't you?
Well, that's just it. I'm always interested in fishing new water and finding new little spots. Of course, I mentioned earlier I live in a place called Houghton, and there is a pretty famous fishing club called the Houghton Club, which is literally a stone's throw from the house. Obviously, frustratingly, I can't get on it, obviously. So I'm trying to find other bits in and around the place. I'm chatting to a lot of people, speak to all my contacts, and I'll just see what comes up. So yes, I can't wait really to see where I end up fishing.
Clearly, your reputation has preceded you with the Houghton Club, so that's probably got something to do with it. And I think, if I remember rightly, we were messaging yesterday or the day before yesterday, and you were doing some tuition and stuff. And as a guide and an instructor, that's going to be kind of interesting to look out and search out new locations to do that. Were you doing some teaching yesterday? Was I right in thinking that?
Teaching yesterday, yeah. What's been happening up until now is I think a few people have been wanting to kind of get together. Obviously, travel's not really allowing it, so I've been booking them up now, kind of weeks and months in advance now. We've got them all up until kind of July, August time at the moment now. But yesterday was kind of one of the first days in which we kind of got out there and started doing it. It's just nice to be back out on the water and finding another spot just to kind of teach from. So at the moment, I'm kind of doing it down in Stockbridge. There's a nice little spot down there on the Avon. So it's nice to kind of have a bit of flow, and nice little coffee shop there where you can kind of go and grab a coffee and and get into the river well away from the bank really, and just you're kind of in the middle of the river on your own and having a nice little private session. So that's a nice spot at the moment. I've got a few other spots lined up as well, which are on lakes rather than on the river. So it's going to depend on the sorts of lessons that I'm doing. If it's the double-handed stuff, then I'll probably go to Stockbridge and get on the river, but maybe the single-handed stuff in the trout. We've got some lakes close by, which I'm in conversations with at the moment.
Brilliant. The Stockbridge, I think, our good friend who we miss dearly, Ian May, I believe that he used to do some teaching down there, didn't he, years ago? And like I say, we miss him. I still miss him greatly. But yes, I have a sense he did some stuff there, didn't he?
And do you know what? It's funny you should say that, because every time I go there, I always think of Ian. And, even yesterday when I was there, he always just pops into my head. I always kind of feel as though he's there, saying, what are you teaching that for? Why are you doing it like that? Which is great. So, yes, it does always remind me of him. I remember once going to visit him in his shop as a kind of drive past Stockbridge. And I always used to veer off to the left to go and pop in sometimes and have a coffee with him. So again, even when I get to that island, he always pops into my head there again. So they're good memories. I'm glad he keeps on popping into my head. I just remember him having a little bit of a laugh and poking fun at me, really. So even now, he's still doing it from the grave, bless him.
Absolutely. It's lovely to still remember, and like you say, to have that association with him is a lovely thing to sort of keep close. And I was sort of scratching round and thinking about things a little bit, and I think it was about how we met, and I think that was about 16 odd years ago, and time flies, doesn't it? It seems as though it's a blink of an eye, doesn't it?
I can't believe it's been that long. It's just, I'm sure we both probably had hair on the top of our heads then, Pete, rather than it falling at the bottom of our chins right now.
Yeah.
But if it's that, I can't believe it's been that long.
No, I think it was. So the backstory was that we were about to do our advanced casting instructor exams, and like you say, we
suspect.
Yeah, And then we were, roommates, and that's it. And it's funny when you go through this sort of process, isn't it, that you've got a common bond that sort of kind of ties you together, even looking beyond fishing with that as well, isn't it? If you've done something with somebody, you chat about it and you stay in touch, and then friendships form as a result of that as well. But that was a really exciting time for me, certainly, in fishing and going through that process. What are your recollections of it?
But do you know what? I think back to taking those exams and the out guy exams, and they are nerve-wracking things, aren't they? I think when you really want something as bad as we both did back then, you put so much pressure on yourself anyway, and you know it's going to be a tough exam. You know there's several parts of the exam. Casting's only part of it, but even then, the casting part of it is like 2 hours on the water of trying not to do a duff cast, which for that amount of time and casting fatigue setting in is always difficult. And like I said, the other elements, whether it's the written exams or even the interview, you're kind of thinking, oh God, what are they going to find now? Where am I a little bit hollow in my kind of fishing knowledge? Are they going to kind of tease it out and I'm going to mess it up at that stage? And I just remember it being, really, really tough. And I think that's what made it so much easier in a way, is that luckily we got on from the get-go. And even when we was in our room chatting, it was all so relaxed. And I think having that moment of relaxation or a laugh in between stress made the whole experience so much easier. And I know for a fact it really helped me, in obtaining that qualification. I was very lucky to have passed the exams, but I'm sure that played a massive part in it. Because if I was still stressed out in my room, and not as relaxed and kind of going down to take the exams or whatever it might well be, it might just push me over the edge. I don't know. So thank you for being so chilled out and fun.
That was cool, wasn't it? I remember us getting up at stupid o'clock in the morning and casting and getting ready for that and everything else. It's just reminded me as well that the written exam portion of it, and somebody said, because we were all taking the written exam at different times, and somebody who didn't know the test said, oh, there was a fly. Somebody asked where a Lunn's particular came from. And I said, oh, that's Mick Lunn from, funnily enough, the Houghton Club, who's a riverkeeper. And so everyone put that in their answer. And I think it was his father who came up with the fly. So everyone got the same answer wrong for the same reason. So I've got to put my hands up and say that was my fault for getting that wrong. But silly little things like that were kind of part of it. And of course, in that time as well, 16 years plus probably, fishing's changed a lot over that time, hasn't it? Or it's morphed into, I guess it's picked up its trouser legs and gone kicking and screaming into modern times. Have you felt it's changed a lot, fly fishing, in that period of time since we started?
I think if anything, it's made it a lot easier. I think you think about the technology behind the rods, the lines, I think so much more thinking goes into the lines now, maybe more than it ever did, with the tapers and delivering the sorts of flies that we want to cast in the conditions that we're in. But that's great, isn't it? Because it just means, it probably makes our lives easier as instructors, and it makes the customers' lives a lot easier because they're out fishing a lot easier now. So yes, I think there's been some kind of quite radical changes. But it's all for the good of the sport, really. So I welcome all of those. And if it makes my life easier when it's fishing myself or customers' lives easier by getting out and fishing, that's just great. I still get a massive buzz of putting a rod in someone's hands or showing them a cast, and then they go, "Oh my God, how am I going to do that?" And then just by breaking it down and putting the rod in their hands, and off they go and they do it. They just know, okay, it's not magic. You can do it, but the equipment that we're using now is just making that end product so much easier. That's brilliant.
And the learning process is so much quicker as well now, isn't it? And it's easier to get information if you're looking to learn about fishing, seek out destinations, seek out fisheries, seek out people to talk about, to get advice. And that's a big aspect of it as well, isn't it? Whereas we may have had the early stages of forums and I guess the early stages of Facebook and everything else that went with it. Now there's so many easier ways, quick ways that you can contact and gather information about places or casting or whatever, or a fly line even, can't you? That's a big part of it as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it has its positives and negatives. I think the fact that you can delve into the great World Wide Web now and type in how to do a spade cast or whatever it might well be, and I think it often depends on who you land on, you know. And for my sins, I like playing golf, right? And I have a golf instructor. You know, I kind of live by my own rules and kind of think, well, okay, I'm not just going to try and live off the internet. I'm going to try and find an instructor, and he'll teach me things. And I'll come back, you know, a few weeks later, and he'll say, "Right, how's it been going?" I say, "Yeah, fine." He said, "Well, show me what you can do." And he said, "Well," and he'll say, "Well, why did you do that particular thing there?" And I say, "Well, I found it on the internet." and he always says, "Will you stop picking these things that you get off the internet?" He said, "Because it's just interfering with everything that I'm doing." And I'm sure it must be the same in the fishing world. I'm sure people must be looking at it and kind of taking all these different tips from people. And some of them are very good. It just depends if you kind of pick up a tip from that might not particularly work as well, or you've got to perform it perfectly for it to work. It can also be a bit of a demon. So I always just like to try and keep things simple. But the fact that we do have all this information and you can delve into it and pick away from it, yes, I must admit, I'd have liked that a long time ago.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because we're almost at the state where there's too much information and everyone could have their own particular view that works, but you could end up confusing the issue a little bit. And I think the word you used there, simple, is really important. And I've noticed that myself with all aspects of fishing. And I've noticed as well as a trend coming out of things, people are looking at stuff more simply. And a lot of the stuff doesn't really matter that much, does it? Get your fly effectively and efficiently from A to B without spooking the fish is the key thing. Then you can tweak things within that. But a lot of it you don't actually need. Am I right in saying that, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you said there is absolutely right. I think the only thing I'd just kind of add to that is just doing it in a safe way as well. You know, again, sometimes you'll get so many people who will get that fly to a particular spot, but they've had to chuck it and duck it, you know, in order to kind of miss the fly that's coming over their back of their head. And that's just a lottery. One day they're going to forget to duck, or it's going to go a little bit lower than they expected. So, yes, I think I've always been a big fan of keeping things really simple. And I think as well in the way that I teach, you know, I often use a lot of analogies for things if I'm drawing particular shapes with the rod tip, whether it's a rugby ball or a circle or a letter or a number or whatever else it might well be. And it's quite bizarre, but because it's slightly bizarre, they tend to remember it. So, but in that way, then it also keeps it simple and easy. And I think, like I said, with all the kit we've got now, it can be simple and easy. So just keep it that way. We don't need to overcomplicate things anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think I guess I call myself a former instructor now, but I think what I always look for a good instructor is having a variety of analogies, as you say, that because everyone's wired differently. And I think I used a picture of Emma single spade casting the other day. Now, she's a fascinating person. She does by watching. So she'll watch me make a single spade and will do it, and then she'll ask me something, and then the moment I start explaining it, you can see the cogs start to go, and that almost ruins it. And now I've just stopped, and if I go down the pool first, I know she's watching, so that'll be going in, and then I just say, lovely cast, wonderful. You know, yesterday was a classic case, and I said, absolutely beautiful cast, and I didn't say anything, and I just let her do it. And that, I think, is how I think sometimes some instructors may or may not take it a little bit too seriously and go through a certain pattern, whereas finding the analogy that works for that particular person is a really key thing, isn't it?
Yeah. First and foremost, I can't believe you went down the pool first. Go a word. but yes, going back to the casting side of things, you rascal.
It was my birthday.
Oh, okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah,
but you know, I do feel as though yes, you do need more than one way to explain a certain cast, and you're absolutely right. There are some people that need to be spoken to and explained the different elements of the cast, and then that's how they get it. And there's other people that are so much more visual and they want to watch somebody do it. And then sometimes you can just get that little blend of in between, and it can be all of those things. And I think sometimes as well, what I've often found is that when you're actually teaching the cast and you're kind of taking them through the motions, just giving them a little bit of a rest and a break, just to kind of let it take in. And I'll just say, do you want to have a little sip of water? And maybe I'll just hold the rod and do a couple of cast films, just so they're kind of watching and letting it sink in and bringing them back in. And just so it's just not so intense, just taking the pressure off. Because I think even the lesson can be a little bit pressurised. You're asking somebody to do something and they can get a bit frustrated. And the lesson should be fun. So I think you've got to think about all of those things. And again, as an instructor, everybody's built differently. It's different sizes. Some are quite strong, some are slightly weaker, some might have bad shoulders, different body shapes. So those hand positions are always going to be going in slightly different places. So again, you kind of almost have to adapt to that and think about the different ways in which you can get around all those things. Because like you said, at the end of the day, we just want to get people fishing and getting that fly out to a safe place. So how are you going to slightly adapt what you normally teach in order to do it? And I must admit, from my point of view, I just want everybody to go away smiling as though they've had a fun day's lesson. I know there's been times when I've experienced lessons, whether that's fly fishing or golf, and I've left and I thought, I've not enjoyed that. I thought it's been too intense. It's not been fun. Do I want to go back? Do I want to pay to go back for that experience? And I wouldn't really. So I think the way in which I always try to do it is just, let's make it fun. Let's keep it simple and have people going away with a smile on their face that they've actually learned something. And I kind of feel as if I do that, then I'm doing something right. And luckily, those customers come back. Not for too long, because hopefully they're casting to a good enough standard where they don't need to come back. But, there's always that middle balance.
Yeah. No, I think that's wisely put. Let's take you back a little bit. And you grew up around Birmingham. You started fishing the water around there. But when did you realise, when was the tipping point for you that you discovered fly fishing was, this is what I want to do, this is the direction I want to go more so than anything else? When did that happen for you?
Well, I think, as you quite rightly said, I was a Birmingham lad, and my parents used to take me down to Kidderminster Canal. So I'd be kind of float fishing there for, small perch and silverfish and all that sort of thing. And I kind of always followed, always did that for a long number of years. And then I moved around the country a little bit. So I went from Birmingham, because I was doing further education. It took me off to Norfolk for a bit. So that was kind of interesting, because obviously, that's a world of pike and things like that. So I kind of found that side of the world quite interesting. And then I moved to London. And I think it was when I moved to London, I became a real carp head. It was all Dalkim alarms, setting up the rods, camping out, so doing all that sort of stuff. And that I must have been about 18, 19 then. And I think the only problem with that was, as much as I enjoyed it, every weekend I'd either be kind of playing football on a Saturday, and straight after that I'd be going down to the local river and casting these Dalkim alarms rods out and setting them up on the buzzers and all that sort of stuff. And I just remember putting on so much weight, because I just remember just sitting there eating biscuits and cups of tea and waiting for the alarms to go off. And I was in a job. I was working in advertising. So the reason why I was doing the further education was because I work in advertising. So my job just means I come up with ideas for brands, making TV commercials or press ads or radios or websites or whatever it is. It can be anything these days. But I remember going into one of my boss's offices, and we were working on Shell at the time. And you're knocking on the door, waiting to go in. And he kind of says, enter, and in you go. And funnily enough, I saw him sitting behind his desk. And for the people that may be watching this, as you can probably see over my shoulder, I've got a little fly tying device there. But for the ones that aren't watching this and you're listening to it, he was literally sitting at his desk at a vice tying flies. And I said, you're into your fishing then. I said, so am I. To be honest with you, I was just trying to get an in. He was the boss. I thought it'd be great if we had something in common to chat about, And we were chatting away about it. I said, yeah, I do fishing. He said, what, fly fishing? I was like, no, carp fishing. And he was like, he was very dismissive, saying, carp fishing. I said, no, I love it. He said, just come and give this a go. So I was like, okay, great. So I met up with him. Funny enough, he was from Birmingham as well. I say Birmingham, he was from Coventry, but it was close enough. And he said, Christmas, come down and visit me and we'll go out. And we ended up meeting up on Christmas Eve, and it was a cold Christmas Eve. We were literally chiseling ice off a boat and getting snow off out the boat seats to kind of get into this boat, and out we go. And I remember going out there just thinking, oh my God, this is just like the worst day ever. And he set me up and put a fly on or whatever. And within 10 minutes, I'd caught a trout. And it just blew my mind. I just kind of thought, oh my God, this is incredible. I like the fact that I was always doing something. Admittedly, 10 minutes in, I don't think I was doing it very well. The first time I'd ever held a rod, it was just literally saying, just do this and do that, you know. And it kind of went from there. And it's just that one cold day. And I always kind of think to myself, what if I hadn't caught fish? Would I still always be carp fishing or whatever else it might be? But I do kind of think that's where the fly fishing journey started. But I think another reason why I'm so into my salmon fishing was because of the carp fishing, because of the bigger fish and the runs that I get from that in comparison to trout or salmon. So I do think there's a little bit of something still ingrained in me there from that. But from that day on, from those early days, you know, when I was almost about 19, 20, I just went fly fishing mad. And I vaguely remember just literally going back in that new year, just literally putting all my kit up for sale so I could go and buy a fly fishing kit, and kind of went from there.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the salmon as well, and you were living in London at the time. And I seem to recall that you were trying to get salmon rivers. You'd finish work on Friday and drive to wherever it was to cast a double-hander somewhere or other. Is that right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So again, you know, in those early days, I was desperate, you know, to catch, you know, salmon, more and more salmon. And I used to literally Friday nights drive up to Scotland, fish Saturday, and then come back on the Sunday. You weren't allowed to fish on the Sundays then, from what I can kind of recall. So it's a long way to go for one day, but I'd also got there and hit an instructor as well. So it'd be like Ian Fairgrieve or somebody. I'd have a lesson and then fish afterwards, or again, just trying to obtain information wherever I could, just kind of bringing it on. And so, yeah, I lost count of how many times I used to kind of do that. It was just, I lived for the weekends. I'd work all week, but I just lived for the weekend to just kind of get out there and fish on that day. And sometimes during the evenings, I'd still be kind of practicing my casting if it was in the summer or something like that. But it would always be on that Saturday, bang them up there. And it'd be the same then with holidays, taking holidays and kind of going up there. And I used to fish the Nith a lot as well. So as an old girlfriend, and her family had a beat on there, so I was very lucky to take advantage of that. Which I think there is the grandmother that used to fish it, but unfortunately she passed away, so it wasn't being used for a long time. So they were happy that somebody was using it. So I was up there all the time fishing that. So yes, I was quite lucky really. I was just trying to get up there and see where I could, and then I got the opportunity. It's a long time ago now when it was in Russia, and one of the big Russian rivers, it was the Karlovka and Litsa camp, were doing a kind of a youth scheme, and they were looking for a small collection of anglers to go over there to fish it at a reduced price. So you had to kind of write them a letter and explain why you think you were able to do that. And so I called them up or had an initial conversation with the guy, funny enough, who actually owned the river time, called Peter Power. And Peter said, well, you sound like you're really into your fishing. You sound as though you'd be suitable for it. If you want to come on it, you're more than welcome. So then I thought to myself, well, how am I going to get the money to do it? How am I going to get the money to do it? So at the time I had a scooter to get me to work. And so I flogged the scooter. So I thought, I've got to do this. I can't miss up this opportunity. I'll never get to fish in Russia again. And that's exactly what I did. I kind of went out and had that experience. And I was very lucky to have caught my first ever 20 pounder when I was out there. It was fresh as a daisy and sea lice, and I still remember the fight to this day. So yeah, so that's where the whole salmon side of things kind of came into it, and salmon becoming a passion as well.
That's an amazing story, and I love, like you say, the passion, selling your scooter, trying to find ways to finance these things, going up for a day to Scotland for a day's fishing is pretty, in my book, certainly hardcore. And we talked about the instructing a little bit earlier, and you're a master instructor with a single hand and a double hand. Did you, it's hard to put you on the spot and say, do you have a favourite to cast? But do you have that? And when you first picked up that double hander, was that sort of a revelation for you as well?
Yes. Is it okay to have a favourite? I'll be totally honest and say I much prefer my double-handed to single-handed. I just think there's something so much more poetic about it. I don't know if it's because I'm in there and I'm wading and it's big rivers and it's big fish, and I think the vivid experiences that I've had while fishing. If somebody said, like, tell me your 5 favourite fish right now, I'm sure 3 salmon would automatically just jump in there. So I do think for me, I'm a much better double-handed fisherman than single-handed fisherman. And then I must admit, of late now, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I've been doing a bit of single-handed fishing for trout in Iceland. And I must admit, again, that's wading because you're on some big kind of wide rivers there. And because of the flow of the river and the size of the trout, those things take off like trains. So again, I think it's all about the thrill of the chase and hooking up to these things and running after them. But yes, I think if I had to go and choose one, if you were twisting my arm, I would go double-handed over single.
Nice. While I've got you then, if somebody's looking to improve their spey casting, what would be, if it is possible, to give them one tip? What would be the tip that you'd give somebody looking to improve their spey casting?
I would say a good proportion of the people that I get probably go a bit too fast. And I think the reason why they're kind of going too fast is to make up for an error somewhere in there. So they're trying to power the line out across the water. Where actually, if you get the technique right, you've got more time than you think. So a lot of people will say, that's a great cast. Now, try reducing the speed by 50%. And it goes a bit better. And I'll go, I'll try and reduce it by another 50%. And you can see their eyes start to open as though, wow, I can't believe I've got this much time. I don't need to rush that much. And it sounds a bit, I was going to say wanky, and that's probably the wrong word to use.
That's fine.
It's so artistic. When you slow it all down, it just looks so much better. And why not? Why not make it look good? So that's what I always say to people, right, just slow it down, take your time, and just watch the cast fly out there. And it's just so much more enjoyable and less of a strain on the body, and just enjoy what you're doing. So that'd be my tip, really, just try and slow it down a bit.
Nice. Perfect. Let's move on a little bit. Can you believe that Fly Culture is coming up 3 years old next? I think it's next issue, or the one. Yeah, I think it's next issue. That'll be 12. We're coming up 3 years old now. Can you kind of remember when we first sort of talked about this idea of bringing a magazine?
I remember the call quite vividly, and you kind of called me up and went, Brett, I know you're in advertising and all that sort of stuff, and how do you feel about print, and is print dead? And I was just like, well, there's a whole thing going on out there about whether people want it anymore, and you got your Kindles and all this going out, and you say, well, I'm thinking of bringing out a fishing magazine. I was like, are you nuts? What are you doing? What are you thinking of? What are you doing? You're like, no, bear with me. This is, I've got this vision, and you talk through it, and the more you talked about it, your passion is always catching anyway, and you were kind of talking me into it, and I was just like, you know what? The more you talk about it, the more this sounds like a great idea, and even then after that, I think even when you had me hooked and I was interested, I think shortly after that you talked about a no ads. And I was just thinking, you're talking to an ad man. What do you mean, no ads? We need ads. We need income. You were like, no, all to do with that ads. And I was just like, oh my God, you're crazy. And like you said, by hook or by crook, here we are nearly 3 years down the line with a product that I absolutely adore. It's something I'm so proud of to be involved with. And my God, I will tell everyone now, you do all the donkey work. You put so much effort and time into it. Without you, it wouldn't exist. So I'm happy to contribute where I can, but my God, what a piece of work to be involved in. Every time a new edition comes through, or we look at it, or you're sending me through a PDF of the latest stories. It's just such an incredible piece of work, and I just love looking through it as a fisherman. And somebody who's interested and has a passion for fishing, who wouldn't want it on their shelves or on their coffee table? I know I'm being biased, and I'm not trying to do this as a selling tool, but I'm just kind of looking back as a customer and going, I would buy that all day long.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating one, and please don't underestimate your input into it, because you are just, and this sounds like a great big love in, so I apologise, but you're such a good sounding board. And what I like is that you will tell me straight, because I get awfully enthusiastic about everything, and sometimes I do need calming a little bit, but you'll tell me, and that's really, really important. I know we talk about covers and we talk about that, and you tell me, and I like that, because I always use the case, and this is probably the reason I have no hair, was that I used to bleach my hair for quite a long time, and people said, oh, that looks fantastic, and then when you have it cut out and go back to normal, they say, oh, you look much better now. Whereas you'll tell me, and I say, look, I've got this idea for the cover, or we've got this, and you'll say that, and that's really, really important to me, and I know you'll tell me that. So that's where it's really cool. And that role of creative director as well, your background CV for that is pretty damn impressive. Central St Martin's, which is probably one of the premier places to study design and art and everything else. That must have, that was in my mindset as well, to have somebody with your caliber looking at that stuff as well. That journey for you must have been fascinating through that art school and everything that went with it, mustn't it?
Yeah, do you know what? I was talking about this the other day. I had to do a podcast for my day job for a company, and we were chatting about it. And I must admit, when I was at school in Birmingham, it probably wasn't the best of schools. Oversized classes, it was a little bit raucous. I probably wasn't a very good pupil, if I'm being honest with you. But I always had a passion for art and design, and I always had a vision that I would go into further education. And I remember telling the people at school, when I was kind of seeing the careers advisor or my headmaster, what are your plans? What are you going to do? And I said, oh, I would like to go to university and get a degree. And I do remember my headmaster laughing at me, going, you've got no chance. And I look back now and go, how bad is that? But anyway, that aside, I went to art school, and I started to excel a little bit there. And then I was very lucky that I then got onto a further education course in Norwich, as I mentioned earlier. And then I've kind of gone so far there, and that's for my an HND, High National Diploma. And I just thought, I've gone this far now, I want to top it off with a degree. So I applied for Central St Martin's. Now, that was a long punt, because I just kind of thought, that's a big ask, but let's give it a go and see what happens. Well, anyway, they accepted me and wanted me on the course. There was a strange ruling at the time when, if you got a grant off the government to do further education, if you'd been to, it enabled you to get your degree, but also something like 3 different universities. Now, because I'd already been at 3, and this was the 4th, it says I wasn't entitled to a grant. So that meant now that I couldn't go to Central St Martin's. So I was like, well, that's not fair. I've got in, and I've not allocated all my year's worth of grants yet, so I should be able to do it. So I contacted my local politician and I gave him a call, and I said, this isn't fair. I said, it's one of the most prestigious art schools in the world. I think at the time, like 90% of the students come from anywhere else in the world. So the chances of getting in from the UK was slim. I said, I've been offered a place. I said, but I can't go in now because of this strange ruling within Birmingham government, or whatever it was. So I managed to get the policy changed. And I got my grant, and I finished off my degree, which was great. So that took a little bit of hardship, but I must admit, they're moving to London. It just kind of opened my eyes up to the whole advertising world, and I think going from somewhere like Birmingham to Norfolk, Norwich that was, and then into London. I just kind of thought, right, I'm in with the big boys now. But if you wanted to do advertising, really, London is where you had to be. You know, back in those days, it was London or New York, and London was always the first stop.
Yeah, lovely. What a lovely story. And it is mildly ironic, as you say, that with the magazine we decided not to have advertising. And I often think about it. I'm pleased personally we didn't go that route, because what it's done is allow us to tread our own path, not that well-worn path that you could easily go down. And so we've done that. Are you pleased in hindsight that we've not done that?
Yeah, 100%. I think from my point of view, when we started looking at the way it's all going to be designed, and obviously working with John and the work that he does is obviously fabulous. But, you know, you look at it all and you kind of think, would ads in between that kind of interrupted that flow? And I've got no doubt that it would. So, you know, I am really pleased we did go down that route, because I just kind of think it just wouldn't be the same offering. And I know it's to our kind of, we could have died on the sword on that, really. You know, luckily, like I said, we're into our third year now, and we're still managing to do it without the advertising income. I suppose from my point of view, when we were first starting off on this, it was such a great adventure. I just didn't want it to fail because we didn't have that extra income coming in. But the fact, as you say, we are in our third year now, by doing that as well and sticking to the guns, that's great. It's definitely the right thing to do.
Yeah. And that was for us. Yeah. And you know that we looked deeply at the pricing for the magazine, and it's not cheap, but we cut no corners on how we print it, the paper that we print it on. It allows us to remain independent. And I know we looked at it, and even what we charge for our magazine, because I don't look at Fly Culture as a mainstream magazine. It is an independent publication. So as I looked at the pricing of independent magazines, and we're actually at the lower end, aren't we, of what people charge for independent magazines?
I think when you look at, when the thing is, you get an idea of what it looks like from the post that we do. For the people that haven't bought a copy yet, I think there's only so much you can pick up from that online. I think when you actually see the quality of it and you feel it and the thickness of the paper, it becomes a piece of I like to say, it's not a magazine, doesn't do it justice. It's a journal that you end up want to kind of keep and put on your shelves and collect them. And I think that's really key. And like you said, it's even in that kind of independent magazine category, we are at the lower end of that. And what you've also got to remember as well, it's only a quarterly. So actually, if you break it down to what you might spend per month on other magazines, £3 a month, whatever it might well be, it's coming cheaper than that. So it's quite a labour of love, actually, for not much money when you start to put it all together. So actually, It becomes a bit of a bargain. I'm being really kind of biased, but honestly, I think for the amount of time and effort that goes into it, it really is good value.
Yeah, it does sound like an ad, and I apologise for us talking about not having adverts, and then we talk about it. But it's been such an interesting process, and I know people are fascinated by what goes on in the background. And I know we've had John on here and you previously, but now a chance to talk about that. And I think that's one of my only regrets, is that we called it magazine. You know, it is more of a journal than anything else, and that probably would have been a better name for it. But I was thinking about website addresses and stuff like that, and Fly Culture Mag seemed to scan a little bit better. But that, I think, is probably my only regret about that. But yeah, it's been a fascinating process, an interesting one, a great big learning process as well. But I'm proud that we pay everybody as well, and I think that's really important to me as well. And what we've tried to do is continually up what we're paying people, and that will continue. If Fly Culture continues on a similar sort of path, that will continue as well. And that's something I know was really important to us from the off as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly that. I think when we were first starting, obviously, it was a small group of people coming together to try and get something off the ground. And I think in the early days, we had to kind of beg, steal, borrow, ask for favours, you know, whatever it could to try and help us out. And luckily, we had a lot of friends who were willing to kind of help us do that. But you can't keep on asking people to do that day in, day out. I just think it's too much of an ask. And by that stage, I think we started to have a few more subscribers, and we were able to kind of help out a little bit more. And like I said, I think that's just naturally grew. With the money that we kind of make from it, we're putting it straight back into the magazine. We're not taking anything out of this. It's just it's a passion. It's crazy, isn't it? It's like that's exactly why we're kind of doing it, just to kind of put something out there that isn't currently out there like it. That is different, and it is a passion job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's move on a little bit from our little world of fly culture and go delve back into fishing. And how does fishing feel to you right now, pre-lockdown, post-lockdown? Is there the boom? Do you think that boom will continue if it is out there? Will people continue going out in the great outdoors? How does that feel to you right now?
I think that's a bit of an unknown at the moment, Pete. I think we were lucky in that it was one of the few sports which were given permission to get you out of the house during lockdown. So at one stage, I think there was a number of sports, of which golf was one as well. And when that stopped and you've got fishing left, I think you've got people out there that are thinking, well, maybe I'll dust down my fishing rods and get out there and give it a go. And you know what? If people have done that, where they've been kind of almost forced to do that in order to find something, and they've got a new passion for it, that's just great, isn't it? I think the more people we can have out there fishing, looking after the rivers, seeing what's kind of going out there, extra sets of eyes on the environment and all that sort of thing, I think that's great. Whether they will stick with it or go back to their other sports, I think we're yet to kind of find out the answer to that. But I think if it's giving the people the opportunity to kind of fall in love with the sport again, and I'm sure some of those people have, because why wouldn't you? I hope that's the case, really.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see. And I wonder if people moving, the ability to work from home will see people shift away from major cities out into the country. And I wonder, as a result of that, if we will start to see people look at more outdoor pursuits, be it fishing, be it whatever it may be. And like you say, it's good if there's more people doing it. The conservation issues are highlighted to a wider audience, and that can't do us any harm. And it feels to me, on that front, does it feel, and I know we've had the Missing Salmon Alliance, we had Michael Frodin on talking about fish farms and stuff like that. Do you sense that volume has ratcheted a little bit higher in recent times as well, that people are becoming more aware of some of these issues that are going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, funny enough, I was only seeing something yesterday or the day before on social media with David Attenborough talking about salmon farms, and if they continue to be, they'll eradicate salmon and salmon will become extinct. And I think having people like that talk about it just raises the profile. And I think you can't raise the profile enough. So the more people that get behind it, even from our perspective, talking about it where we can, because we want to safeguard this wonderful sport that we're all in. If we don't look after the rivers or the fish stocks or whatever we've got, there's not going to be nothing there to fish for. So the more we can do that, raise the profile, the better. Because if we don't do it now, we're just going to run out of time. It's going to be too late. So yes, more the merrier. The more we can talk about it, the better.
And I think I've touched on this before, so apologies, but, I've had Paul Whitehouse as a guest on here and Fergal Sharkey as guests. And I think the TV programme, Mortimer and Whitehouse Going Fishing, and having Fergal on as a guest was a masterstroke for me, and one of the major pivotal points of that programme, that to a wider audience, because it's reached a lot of people, it's done so much good, that allowing him to appear as a guest on there and talk about what's going on, I think was really, really important, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I must admit, Fergal Sharkey has been involved in quite a few things now, isn't he? I know he's involved with the Salmon Trade Conservation Society as well. And when you hear him talk, you wouldn't want him on your case, would you? He just looks like he's like a dog with a bone, and that's exactly what you want now in this industry. I'm so glad he's on our side, and he just looks like he's kind of really making a headway. So, like I said, it's just more the merrier, and the more we can kind of create a voice and try and do something and make things better, it's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So I know as an angler you love to travel, and we are hoping at some stage to get to Italy to fish with our first fly culture on tour, or the Italian job as we called it. And I'm so excited about that. Whether that happens or not, I do not know. It may not be this year. If it's not this year, it'll be next year. So that's fine. That's still something to look forward to. I cannot wait for that, I have to say. Have you missed not travelling, and are you looking forward to things freeing up a little bit in the future to be able to travel again?
I have seriously missed my travelling. I think the last year I had to cancel a trip to Canada fishing for the Chinooks, and that got rolled over to this year. But because of the time when I was supposed to be going out, it's been cancelled again. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I was very lucky that last year, during one of the windows out of lockdown, I was able to nip out to Iceland and fish for trout. And that was a great trip. I must admit the conditions were terrible, but it was just so nice to get out and be with friends and just fish on a riverbank again. So that was awesome. And then this year, like I said, I think there's an Iceland trip which I've had to cancel again. And like I said, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed for Italy, because I think, it'd just be so nice to kind of get out there. And I've not fished Italy before, so it'd be nice to kind of add a new country to the list. But I do miss it. I just love going to new places and ticking off different species of fish where I can. I must admit, every year I try and think, let's try and tick off a different one where I can. And obviously, as we've been in lockdown for so long, that's not happening. But yeah, this is the opportunity to kind of experience new cultures, new fish, new styles of fishing. I love going somewhere new and you kind of meet up with a guide or whatever, and they introduce something new to you or something you hadn't thought of before. It just makes your whole repertoire so much deeper. So that's something else I always look for as well. I just love it when they just say, try this, try that. Have you seen this fly? I just kind of think, well, no, how are you doing that? And I love that. So at least when I come home, I can try it on these fish as well if I can.
Yeah. And I remember a piece you wrote for Fly Culture about a trip, because it's lovely how your job takes you to many countries that you tag some fishing onto that. And there was a piece you wrote about South Africa and the fly that you were using there, the RAB, wasn't it? I think RAB. Yeah. And that was really, really cool. And that looked fascinating fishing as well. And is there somewhere that is on that list or on that radar that you wish or hope to one day try and tick off? Is there something that really stands out that you'd love to do?
God, there's so many. I think I don't even know where to start. I think the peacock bass, I still haven't done that yet. And like I said, I think as you mentioned earlier, I was lucky to go and be working over in Argentina one year. And as I'd already done the sea trout, I kind of thought, well, let's try something different. And I went for the golden dorado. So that's kind of heading north out of Buenos Aires into the kind of the marshlands there. And those things are incredible. But I do quite like these like far-flung places, like these arapaima and things like these strange kind of almost snake-like, fish-like creatures that just look massive. I think it comes back to the bigger fish again. I do like these big fish, and you don't hook into them often, but they just give you a hell of a tussle. And I must admit, GTs as well. I've got to do more GTs. There's so much, Pete, isn't there? I think anything that literally kind of eats a fly, I would kind of chuck something at it, and I sort of add it to my list.
Nice. Have you ever caught salmon on dry flies?
Yes, bombers. So again, like if I'm doing that I was lucky enough to do a little bit of that in Russia. But in Iceland, for example, a lot more of the bomber action going on there and hitching flies. And oh my God, just watching them come up and taking those flies like that is just incredible. There was I remember meeting a couple of guys when I was in Russia from Canada. And again, most of the anglers that were all there, we were kind of almost fishing it more traditional, I would say, where it's kind of swinging flies down and across and all that sort of thing. And I think that the camp, there must have been about 14 anglers. And let's just say the group had caught 200 fish. These two guys had probably accounted for 100, like half the amount of catches. And they were fishing with single-handed rods, upstream bombers, dead drifting and back. And that just blew my mind. I was just like, how we don't fish like that. And but obviously it was a technique that worked, and not only worked, was deadly. So I think, again, it's kind of meeting people like that, or again, kind of finding out new techniques that you wouldn't have actually considered. And again, seeing that technique work in other salmon rivers, such as Iceland, where you just kind of realise there are more than one ways to catching fish, and the more repertoires or variations you've got up your sleeve, the better, really.
Do you think those sorts of decisions come down to confidence, in the sense that, you know, if I was there for a week, I'd want to start off certainly saying, right, okay, well, I'd like to try and catch a fish and then see how it goes from there. And do you think that is that, because I guess if they're from Canada, that's where I was getting at with salmon on dry flies, because I think that's a dream for me, to head somewhere like that and trying to catch salmon on dry fly. Do you think that's where it is, that those guys had had experience of doing that, knew it worked on Atlantic salmon, so went with that? Do you think that's where that comes from?
You know what? Again, I was having this conversation with Gary Champion a couple of days ago. So Gary Champion, mentor of mine. I say ex, he's always been my mentor, still will be, as a fishing instructor and fishing guide, really. And he's currently out guiding on the Midfjordur in Iceland. And he's really got into fishing bombers, and he's also fishing on like a split cane rod, which is typically Gary. But he was saying how what he found really interesting. So I was picking his brains, even though I couldn't get out there. I was picking his brains about the fishing and what's happening and how you're catching them and what techniques you're using and all this sort of thing. And he was saying to me, it's really interesting. A lot of people go out there and fish, and they might catch them in on a more traditional style. And then they say, as an afterthought, what about a bomber or a hitch or whatever? He said, and then he's had some clients who go, right, let's just go out today with bombers and catch a fish from the get-go on a bomber. He said it's really interesting to kind of have that mindset, because actually he was noticing on occasions that the catch rate just wasn't changing. If you're going out there with the bombers with that way and fishing the pool in that particular way, you weren't disturbing the fish or whatever, and you were still getting as many takes. So I think it does become down to a confidence thing, where you just kind of think, well, okay, where do I feel comfortable? If I'm in Iceland, I'm only be here for 3 days, and I'm sharing a rod, so that takes it down to a day and a half, and I want to catch fish. So do I catch them on how I've caught them before, rather than trying a new technique, which you're not going to have as much confidence in, but could equally be as deadly? What are you missing out on? So it will come down to the individual, I think, and thinking, will I be brave and go for it? Or do I just do what I always do?
Yeah, I did it on the last steelheading trip, and I just fished traditional patterns and stuck with it, and it worked okay. It was great, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And yeah, I get exactly like you say, on a limited trip, and you're going to say, right, I've caught a fish or two, put those on, and then you're thinking, oh, am I missing out here? Should I be? And it's easy to dip out of it again. And it's having somebody, I guess, on the water, isn't it, that says, look, stick with it, it's going to work, that gives you confidence to do that, I guess, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I think if you go out there, just as you were saying earlier, that, I'd love to catch a salmon on a dry fly, you just got to go out there and do it. And then who knows if that's how they're taking the flies that day. And you might have a bonanza day on it, whereas you might not have done just fishing traditionally. Yeah. So sometimes you just have to kind of stick to your guns. That's not to say you don't change, saying that, if you're out there fishing all day and things aren't catching, is it stupidity to keep on sticking with the same technique? And are you going to change, or is it just the fish just aren't on then? I think that's the beauty of it. It's sort of going to be needling away in your head as to how you're going to catch these fish.
Yeah, and that's where I'd probably put the dry on, because I think, well, there's bugger all else happening. Let's try that. And then you probably do give that a go, and then perhaps that doesn't work. Like you say, if the fish are on or they're not on, or whatever may happen. So, yeah, it's fascinating to think about these things. And I think sometimes we just overthink it, don't we? And you end up going down a route that you probably don't need to go down, do you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to, coming up an hour now, so we're going to start winding things down a little bit, but we've talked about your skill and prowess with both single and double-handed rods. Just for a little bit touching on tackle and stuff, and I know you've had a long relationship as an Orvis endorsed guide. Do you have a favourite piece of tackle? Is there a piece that you think, this I'd put in the Hall of Fame, or at least I'd put it up to be nominated for it? Is there a piece of tackle or a rod that you've got that you think, I can't sell this, this stays with me forever, sort of thing?
Well, first things first, then I'm going to say, obviously, I love the new Helios 3 and the Mirage Orvis rods. I think they're a lovely set of rods. But I'm going to put that to one side for a second, because I must admit they are fabulous. When I put them to one side, I think if I had to pick a rod, or two rods actually, I'm going to come back to when we were doing our casting exams, and I just remember like literally living with these rods in my hand. And that would have been the Sage range, and it would have been the XP from my single hander, and the European, I think it's the 15-foot one. Wasn't it funny having that little one, the little 15-foot 1 inch European at the time? But I think it's just because I became so fond of those, and I think because they helped me pass my exams all the time at the time. Those are the two I've kind of chuck in there. The other one I'd probably chuck in there as well, and it's only because when I went on to take my master's exams, would have been the G Loomis grease line salmon rod. Was a beautiful rod. So I know you asked me for one, but I've probably chucked in three there, haven't I?
No, that's absolutely fine. I think they're good choices as well. I did mine at the same time as you with the Sage SP, which I still think's a fabulous rod. It was interesting. Funnily enough, I was talking to Gerald the other day, and we were just casting. We'd been working on the river, and we just got some rods out and started casting them. And it was funny that he was saying that now they're looking at, you can use a single spay line for the spay casters. I said, not in my day. We just had a Snowbee XS line, and that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was it, yeah. And again, we always had to slightly adapt that for the lesson anyway, to kind of cut the front end off a little bit, because it got a little bit thin and all that sort of stuff, remember?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it, how those things again it brings us round full circle, doesn't it, to say how things have marched on since we first did that, and how things have changed. The XS is still out there and doing good work, so that's kind of cool to see from that point of view as well. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and it's been fun to be on that journey with you on a number of ways, as an instructor and in our little publishing world and everything that goes with it. And it's all pretty good though, isn't it? And life's good, and fishing's good, and you're looking forward to it, I guess.
Oh, do you know what? I'm a very lucky man. I feel blessed. I've got a lovely family. My day job's going well. I'm enjoying my fishing. Life couldn't be better, really. I'm very lucky. Little leprechaun O'Connor.
Yeah. Well, I hope we're able to get to fish together again soon. I know we had a memorable day on the chalk streams last year, which was fantastic. And I know you managed to get down here from time to time as well. So I hope when things are safer that we're able to meet up, wet a line, do some fishing. We'll talk as we always do. But Brett, it's been wonderful catching up. I hope the sound quality, I'm slightly nervous, obviously, with this one, that the sound quality is okay. But it's been wonderful having you along, Bud, and wonderful chatting. And thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
My pleasure. Listen, Pete, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure having a chat with you. And like you say, hopefully I can see you in person before too long. And let's get out there fishing again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm amen to that. And yeah, I hope that's real soon. So thanks, Brett, very much indeed. If people want to book some tuition with you, if they're in that neck of the woods, how do they get hold of you?
Find me on my website, Brett O'Connor Fly Fishing. Simple as that. .com.
Fantastic. Fantastic, mate. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one. As ever, there are plenty more. Thank you for your support of fly culture as well. Both of us actually greatly appreciate it. We love that you're digging what we're doing as well. And it's been wonderful to see our little dream grow a little bit over the last 3 years as well. So that's been fantastic. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening to the Fly Culture podcast. There'll be some more real soon. Thank you.